All right, tell us about the art scene in New York during the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever you want.
Okay. When I came home from the hospital, I was a 17-year-old teenager. And when I was 18, I started to go to the Art Students League.
About what year was this?
It was during the war, I think 1943 or something like that, 44. The war was really hot over in Europe. And the Art Students League was flooded with refugees, chiefly in the teaching department. There was a Japanese artist who was very famous at the time. I don't think he's famous anymore, Kuniyoshi. And then there was, I think he was Greek, he was Archipinko, a sculptor. And both Kuniyoshi and Archipinko, for some reason or other, they didn't know how to act as teachers. What they'd do is this really happened, they would grab young female students, grab them around their waist and put them in their lap, you know. This included me. You know, I'm like, like all the girls, and I don't know what they did, but I elbowed them, I punched them, I screamed, and you know, when I finally got out of their embrace and got on my feet, they would just laugh and be astonished at my behavior, you know. I don't, in Europe, when these silly men grab the young girls, what do the girls do? They act honored or what? I don't know. Anyway, everywhere, I learned about that early on. And I spent the first year or so in painting and that sort of thing. Very foolishly, I did not go into the commercial art department. They had a floor of commercial art teachers. And one of them was, gee, I'm having a senior moment. I can't remember his name. It begins with a G. Andrew, can you remember? You know, that wonderful German cartoonist.
No.
Anyway, I should have gone in that class. I didn't. Kill me, you know. I'm still beating myself up about that, and it happened, what, 60 years ago, 65 years ago? No, more than that, before you were born, Andrew. Anyway, Groz, that's it. G-R-O-Z. Wonderful Groz. He was in the building and I ignored it. Anyway, I was in the painting building, you know, and what a waste of time. I was in somebody's class called Corbino. Anyway, I eventually found my way down to the basement in the sculpture department. And there were the refugees down there too. I went into an Italian guy's named Zorak, Z-O-R-A-C-H, Zorak, very well known, but they were all well known. I don't know how the league managed to get all these famous artists in the building at one time, but they did. Zorak was a pompous ass. He lived in Brooklyn. I went out there one evening, you know, just because I'd been invited and I wanted to be polite. And there was his wife, and I, you know, you saw these two people together, and you realize what a boring couple they were. You know, they were in their 50s, bad looking. I think, well, I was still an adolescent, you know, adolescence really have contempt for every adult, and Zurich was no exception. One day he was criticizing one of the students' work. It was a girl, and he was criticizing her and criticizing her work and stuff, you know, and I'm listening to him blab, and then he said, and as for this problem, you should get my book. He had written a big fat book, it cost a fortune. He said, you should get my book and it'll explain everything. And I jumped in there between him and this dude and I said, why should she buy your book when she's paid for this class? You tell her what she wants to hear right now for nothing. You know, I mean, I had no respect for anybody, including the teachers. And poor Zurak, he was completely embarrassed. And so was this poor girl, you know. They both wanted me to drop dead. Anyway, I was never good at solving anybody's problems, including my own. But Zurak at least had the decency to keep his hands off me. Which those European teachers, that's what they did. They put their hands on the girls. Ooh, I mean, today that could never be done, you know. That'd be in the newspapers the next day on the front page if they did. Anyway, I didn't learn anything except, you know, a few basics. And as for the students, they were almost all female debutantes. There were no men. And the handful of men who were there, like every other man in New York who wasn't in uniform, they felt subdued and embarrassed. They knew they had flat feet because that was how they were discussed. Oh, you're flat-footed, 4F, you know, you can't get into the army. But they were all hangdog, and there were almost no men. But the woman, there was one absolutely beautiful Oriental woman. She painted her face like a doll. She looked like a doll. And she mostly just sort of hung out. And she wasn't a student. She was just someone who walked into the building and sat in the hallway and was picked up by any man who could afford her. She was beautiful, elegant. She didn't say a word because she didn't have any English. And there was a student there, a beautiful, well, I use the word beautiful because we were all young people were beautiful. So she was beautiful like all young people. And she had bright red hair, and we would call it frizzy, but in those days it was curly. Curly up to here, down to here. Gorgeous. You know, eyebrows were red, you know, she was a real redhead, a real beauty. And she was the daughter of the ambassador from Australia, and they lived in an apartment in Coopersville. Now, I don't know if you've been in one of these Coopertown apartments, but they are nothing at all like Stuyvesant Town, their neighbor. The Coopers are, the living room was so big, you know, it was impossible to decorate it. And they had hallways and everything. I mean, you had to have servants in those Coopervilles because they were so big. Anyway, besides their apartment, getting back to the daughter, she didn't have much to choose from, but she picked the one man in the Art Students League who would literally drive her parents up the wall. That's how I got to their apartment. This couple brought me along to sort of soothe the behavior of her parents, when she introduced her boyfriend to them, her boyfriend was Japanese. Poor Coke. Coke was a darling man. But his parents and his brothers and his whole family were interned out in California. And he didn't want that for himself. So when war struck, he was in Chicago in a studying art, and he right away hopped over to New York to get as far away from California as possible. Anyway, Coke was, I don't know if he was as young as the rest of us. He had bad skin, sort of blotchy skin, and he was short and stocky. There's nothing elegant about Coke, but he was a very good man. I mean, he was very trustworthy, you know. And this is what we call the dirty Japs and the yellow monkeys, you know. This yellow monkey was in every way a gentleman. Anyway, he and this ambassador's daughter shacked up in a studio on, it was Union Square. They still call it Union Square, and in a loft. And anyway, that was the war years. I don't want to talk anymore about that.